So I have a serious question for you, though. If you are, one of those Ron and me shippers at this point, you know, for okay, if you think that, and you were the person who said, at the end of the day, you gross Ron and Hermione are like, or sorry, Harry and Hermione are like brother and sister, then the question that I've got for you is, are you saying that because that is what J.K. Rowling put in her text? Or are you saying that because that's how you see them? I mean, are you basing your opinion on what's in canon or based on the behavior between the two of them? Because, I looked into it, and what I have seen by the family tree of, and Rowling and her family tree, and the history of what her siblings have said and everything about their relationship, she is the product of having a privileged family, and I don't mean that in terms of, having the privilege of um, wealth and prosperity and that stuff, because I know she kind of grew up poor and was on basically the equivalent of welfare before she became rich from writing these books. And she's a real rags to riches story, like a real life version of it. I'm I'm aware of that, about Miss Rowling's background and everything, but the one thing that I'm left with is, inquiry wise, and the reason why I say that she's privileged is that, her and her siblings basically got along. She had functional relationship with hers. That is a privilege that I don't share. I come from a family that is relatively dysfunctional, in nature, so, we we don't get on really very well. I don't have a very supportive sister, really, at the end of the day. Very neglectful, very, um, doesn't seem to really care about me, sort of, doesn't really show it very well at all. And, when I need her, is always more concerned with how, you know, um, my a need for her support impacts her than, me as a person. So it's, Rowling doesn't have a terribly fascinating, family dynamic, but, at the end of the day, she has privilege in that, she comes from a family that's boring and unnoteworthy because of the fact that it basically, you know, they they got on, and there's no negativity to zero in on there that would make it interesting, you know, in the story. And so, I'm asking the question. I mean, do you base your opinion based on the behavior between the two of them, or do you base your opinion on, what the canon itself says? Because to me, I don't really care what Harry, you know, how Harry talks and says that he sees the relationship between the two of them. I don't really care. What I care about is what the social dynamic is between the two of them and how they treat each other. And what I see at the end of the day is basically, for one thing, Ron mistreats Hermione and treats her like absolute dog shit, and two, Harry treats her a lot better, regardless of how in canon he claims to see her. He is much better to her. Now, a lot of people have dismissed this whole, love triangle as garbage, and, basically asked the question, why does Hermione need to end up with anybody? Fine, whatever. That would be kind of a feminist take to take on things, and sure, maybe she doesn't need to end up with either of them, but if you're somebody that wants your romance kinks, like, I did, I like that sort of thing. I gotta say, I felt that they made a much better pair at the end of the day than the actual canon pair. For the simple reason that regardless of how Harry claims to have seen, Hermione, he treats her a lot better. She isn't privy to his private thoughts in regards to her. He doesn't bully and belittle her, based on the way that he feels, you know, compared to, how Ron does. Ron is just absolutely belligerent to her the whole fucking time of the books. He's absolutely, and I'm not saying that she never made any mistakes or anything, or I don't know, I feel that they lashed out at each other a lot, and it just was not a healthy romantic context at all. And everybody else is kind of like, oh, but you take shit much more personally when it's that one person that you're close to, and that you're dating, and it's just a natural way to date. Everybody, I'm face palming at this shit because what I'm thinking to myself is that they treat each other like absolute shit. So of course this is just, that just makes everything worse. The way that they act towards each other, and Ron, I have such a powerful distaste for the relationship. Like, it's not even just, some of it is just personal. Like, it's the way that I feel about all of it. Like, I am sick of it. There is a certain kind of take on romantic love that has become sort of entrenched, and it's so common, and it's the social take in a lot of ways on it, which kind of treats it as this sort of thing to be embarrassed by or to be ashamed of, and it tries to denigrate it and put it in this downward position where it's something to be embarrassed by. But everybody feels it to a certain extent towards somebody. It's a very familiar and utterly human experience to have this sort of attraction to another human being. Like, that is a normal fucking thing for people to be going through, and yet the cultural take on it a lot of the time is to push it under and to pretend that it isn't. It's lowered, it's treated as dog shit, it's not important, it's something to be embarrassed by. You have to be ashamed of your affections for somebody else. And when I read the books, Ron kind of comes across as in denial of the fact that he's into her and ashamed of his feelings towards her. He doesn't want to admit to himself that he actually likes her, in the books and everything. And I just find that, I don't know. I mean, I feel that this might make for, I guess, where is the story if the man isn't dense? Where is the story if there isn't some sort of, denial? How do you stretch the romance out to the length of time where somebody that came into it and was reading the books could enjoy the experience? Okay, like, I get that aspect of it, but I'm also like, relationship goals don't aim for this. Don't, I just don't think that being in love with somebody is something to be fucking ashamed of. Okay, like, I don't feel that way about it, and I think it's really kind of crap that this is the message that kind of gets sent home about from the culture, is that this is something to be embarrassed by. I mean, like, if I like somebody, especially if they reciprocate those feelings, then, of course, I'm going to be proud of the fact that they reciprocate it. And, fuck feeling ashamed of being attracted to somebody. Like, fuck that. So, anyways, I got a lot of that sort of feeling in Harry Potter, and that sort of, romance is not, it's treated as sort of shameful in a way. And I just like that about a lot of the writing in the books. But no, I don't fucking care, okay, what Harry's private thoughts are, towards her, because Harry doesn't treat her like shit the way that Ron does, and so it's like, whatever. I feel that they make a much better couple.